Karyn has worked in the police for the last 20 years in Sussex, Lancashire, West Mercia, and as head of intelligence analysis. She joined Strathclyde Police 10 years ago and was responsible for setting up the intelligence function. In 2004, she and John Canocan wrote a report on violence reduction for Strathclyde Police, proposing a different way of addressing violence in Scotland. Karyn and John went on to set up the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, which is a national unit. She supports Medics Against Violence charity in Scotland, which is set up in conjunction with the Violence Reduction Unit, where doctors and surgeons attend schools to give inputs on violence reduction and injury and keeping safe to students. Karyn trained as a registered nurse. She has a BSc and an MSc in psychology, and she's also a Fellow by Distinction of the Faculty of Public Health. She's worked in a variety of settings within the National Health Service in East Africa and also in Her Majesty's prisons. She completed the Strategic Command course in 2009 and spent a year in the Metropolitan Police developing a violence plan and leading the Territorial Policing Change Program. The Institute of Directors awarded her a Female Director of the Year in April 2012, and The Guardian newspaper nominated her as Public Service Leader of the Year. Please join me in welcoming Karyn McClusky.
So, listen, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the genesis of where we came from. I am part of Police Scotland, and when I came to Strathclyde 10 years ago, we were facing quite a number of challenges. I'm also moving around because I fell off a podium 2 months ago, fell flat on my backside, you know, that sort of thing, and just mortifying. So, these are the guys that I'm dealing with, and this is my motto for the year: proceed until apprehended. The Chief Constable, I have to say, is not overly fond of it, because last year it was, it's better to apologise than to ask for permission, which didn't work out overly well for me. So, first off, violence. It is a wicked problem. Complex, complicated. You're not going to get to the stage that you say it's fixed. If I'd have been really clever in 2004, I'd have probably looked at burglary. I could have given everybody really strong doors, told them to keep their lights on, not keep any cash around, and then ridden off into the sunset and said, that's it, fixed. I'm not going to get there in violence. You can make it better and not worse. And that's what we try to do. So, it's a wicked problem. And I'm not going to talk about stats, because I've decided that if you torture your data enough, it'll confess to absolutely anything. And I've realised that we're at a 37-year low for crime. And I've also realised that, you know, success has many fathers. When I started, people were saying, good luck with that, Karyn. And now it's actually, we're way down. I've suddenly realised that everybody's taking a little bit of, you know, the control. You know, police are saying, we're bloody fantastic. Education are saying how great they are, you know. And it is everybody. It is everybody. So I'm not going to talk a lot about stats. I know some of the academics and people who are coming later on will probably talk to you about anything, about a whole range of things. And I want to talk to you about history. I was given a 3-line whip after the riots happened in London. I had a phone call from the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister saying, you will get your backside down here pretty damn pronto, and you'll start to, and you'll tell us about violence. And I showed them this, because the Metropolitan Police like to think that they invented violence. This is Plato in the 5th century. What is happening to our young people? They disrespect their elders, they disobey their parents, they mob and they riot. But I like the bit down below, because I've got a 13-year-old. As for the girls, they are forward, immodest, and unladylike in speech, behaviour and dress. For those of you with teenagers, you'll get what I mean. Peter the Hermit, 13th century. We've had it for a long time. We teach our kids not to be violent. You teach them. That's why you teach your kids not to hit. So lots of it's about education. And this is what started me off. When I came to Strathclyde in 2000 and 2003, the UN Peace Monitor came out, and what it said was that Scotland was the most violent country in Europe, and that Glasgow was the most violent city. Now, you can imagine that Visit Scotland, our tourism board, was absolutely delighted. I quite like putting Colombia up there because it makes us look really, really good, you know. Now, you can do two things when you're faced with statistics. You can either deny it and say, these lot don't record it right, or you can admit it. You know that we are Scotland and we have a problem. Is anybody Scottish in here? Anybody got Scottish blood? Right, we're all doomed, right? So, and I'll talk about that later on. So, you start to think, right, let's do something about it. And that's what we did. So I spoke to the Chief Constable. And I said, right, Chief, I want to do something very different. I said, I want to set up a violence reduction unit. I said, because frankly, the policing for the last 30 years has really delivered hee-haw difference in terms of crime prevention. We have been great at detection. 98% detection rate for murders. Our prisons were full, but we hadn't made a great deal of difference. And to his credit, he did not send me to the traffic department, which is normally where he sends people that are a real problem. And he said, do you think you can do it? He said, do you have a map? And I said, no, but I have a compass point. I know what it looks like. And we'll work out how we get there. And then I started to look at some of the background evidence to the academics in the group. I got loads of them around the table and I said, right, like, tell me what I've got to do. And I got to the end of lots of papers and what I would say was, but this needs more research. You know that bit? And I had to say to them, I had a group of them and I said, I'm in a burning platform here. The chief is going to hang me by the neck until dead. I need to know what to do, so you tell me what to do. And I put a challenge out to them. And I'm still waiting. I work with some really great academics. And I know Nick is going to talk about it later on, some of the stuff that he does. There are two components to violence before I start. First is the propensity to be violent. Now, that's all the skills that you get early years. So your compassion, your empathy, your communication, your teamwork, and a whole range of things. And then the second is a trigger of violence, which is the social factors. Going out in the nighttime economy, you know, the places that allow you to be violent. So that's the two factors in violence. And what we decided to do was look at something very different, because the policing response to violence was, you reported an offence, I would then record it, we'd then investigate it, depending on what police force you'd be in, it would get detected. And that's the criminal justice response. That's what we do. We've been doing it for 150 years. And what I said was, well, let's look at this differently. Let's change the framework. Let's look at dealing with violence as a disease, just like TB, just like measles, and work out how you catch it, how you pass it on, how it's transmitted, and then how you treat it. And we turned violence into a public health issue in Scotland. We are the only country still, I'm the only police member of the World Health Organization. We're the only country who actually have violence as a stated public health issue. Now, can I tell you, I'd love to tell you that that was by design, and that, you know, it was something that I really set out to do. It was more by luck. Luck's a great thing, you know. I found it and I thought I'd had a health background, let's change it into health. It fundamentally changed the way that we do things, because people stopped looking at the police to try and deliver stuff and started to look at themselves. So, it's a public health issue. And actually, at the same time we were doing that, the WHO came out and they said, violence is a public health issue. It's a disease, absolutely a disease. Sadly, there is no vaccination yet, but if there's any scientists in the room and you want to work in it, then I'm all with you. So, if you're going to try and stop a disease, what would you do? Now, this is what the World Health say. So, if you had Ebola, if you had measles, you would first interrupt transmission. And we'll talk about that later on. Then you would change behaviour, and lots of people here are involved in doing that, and then you would change the norms. Because the norms around violence, and particularly in Scotland, were that that's just what happened. They were scum and they would always be scum. And that nothing could change. When I first went to the prison service and I said, I want to do violence reduction, somebody very senior said, it's too big, don't bother. He gave me a cup of tea and a biscuit, and I never went back to see him. You get 3 opportunities when you're trying to do something big. You can lead, you can follow, or you can get out the way. That's it. If you don't want to do it, don't stand in the way of progress or somebody else trying to do something. So we first started to look at surveillance. What do we know? This is just, I'm doing this very quickly. I can't cover the whole list of things that we do. And so what I decided to do, I would look at accident emergency, the people coming in who were assaulted through violence. And this is all our figures down the bottom line. And it was pretty stable. And then my consultants in A&E got some figures, and that was a real pattern of violence. So we in the police were saying, yes, crime is coming down. It's up 2%, down 5%, up 3%. It meant absolutely nothing. Because there was communities out there who were thinking, you know, she's either an idiot and doesn't know what's happening, or she's lying. And both of those are really bad things. And the measure of great violence reduction is being able to reduce that A&E door, your emergency room door. So that was the scale that we did. Right, so let me tell you about David, because the wee 15-and-a-half-year-old, what do you want to do with him just now? Jail him forever. Hang him by the neck until dead. Before he's even born, his mum's got alcohol problems and he lives on income support. Born 81. Average life expectancy for men in Scotland is 55, which I understand is about the same as your Aboriginal communities here. 55. Although some would suggest we die young just because we want to, if anybody's been to Scotland and sees the weather. He's got domestic violence in the house and he's rehomed. You're thinking about the infection. How many times do you need to report, you need to experience domestic violence before you're rehomed or even report it to the police? It's about 37 times in the UK. Starting to pick up when he's infected. Goes to nursery, a wee school, rehoused again because of continuing domestic violence, if only it just happened once. Family move, moves in his maternal grandmother during the week because grannies are absolutely bloody lovely, are they not? Complex family. In the house are 4 adult males, his uncles, with 160 convictions between them. And that's where we put an 8-year-old boy because his mum can't cope. And this is actually where he lives. That's a Commonwealth Games site. And that's the actual house. Physical regeneration. We've made places look nice. We've spent loads of money. But we didn't socially regenerate. You know, the people behind the front door. We didn't invest in them. So we made everything look nice, no outside toilets. And I drive up and down there quite fast sometimes. Family rehoused again due to continued domestic violence. Rehoused because we're not sharing information. Rehoused again and again and again. He starts secondary school and I speak to the head teacher and I say, do you remember him? And he said, oh yes, do you know he was the most diminutive boy in the year? And when I spoke to the chief medical officer, Sir Harry Burns in Scotland, he said he probably had fetal alcohol syndrome that was undiagnosed. Gets involved in gang rivalry. These are our gang territories. We've had them for a number of years. Some of them don't even exist anymore. It's adults who keep it going. They say, oh, don't go there. You know, don't you walk through that high end or the low end? And these are assaults. We've got the Shettleston Tigers, Parkhead border. There's no any tigers in Shettleston. Moves to Easterhouse, which is up here, which is, you see, a different gang territories. He commits 2 breaches of the peace. He's referred to the reporter and social work become involved. Social work's a really hard job. A 22-year-old social worker is allocated to that case. Some of you guys look a bit older than 22. You would need every skill in the book to be able to get into that family. You know, that's a really complex family and really cute to services. Doesn't like education, doesn't like social work, doesn't like the police. Do you know who can get through that front door? Health can get through that front door, and sometimes housing. His family move again, he leaves school. He's done with housebreaking with intent, he's excluded into it, he's a solvent abuser, drinks alcohol, done with assault, shoplifting, theft, breach of the peace, theft of car, family move again, he's done with murder at the age of 15 and a half. Can I just point something out? See when he's a pain in the backside, we are all over him like a rash. See when he really needed our help, we're nowhere to be found. Isn't it? It's not until the drama becomes a crisis that we all get involved. That's where the majority of our money goes. When he was convicted, the judge, in his post-trial report said, there did not seem to be anything in the background to suggest that Baird was anything other than a pretty ordinary teenager, although one familiar with general and indeed quite organised levels of gang violence. He seems to come from a decent, supportive family and to show genuine abhorrence for what he did. Now, to show abhorrence, you need empathy. Now, empathy is what takes me from taking your scarf because it's yours, and you get it early years. And if you don't get it early, it's really difficult to get later on, so goes to jail. Mum dies of heroin overdose, sister's put in secure accommodation, goes on escorted leave, released on life licence. When he was released, Scottish ministers noted he could look forward to wide support from his family in Glasgow, and his employment prospects look good. You know what's coming, don't you? It's not even suspenseful. So do you remember this is where we released him? So, back there. So, this is problem-orientated policing side. So, next door to him, Christopher L., he attacks a male with a baseball bat in 2006. Mr. and Mrs. N, she's a knife carrier, he's a heroin dealer and a threat to police safety. Next door to them is a self dealer where dad at number 14 makes counterfeit DVDs. David's girlfriend, upstairs an organised crime group. A Valium dealer, cannabis dealer, Camas house in the street. Cannabis next to say, heroin dealer. Are you starting to see where the employment prospects are? It's really interesting. When I showed housing department this, they said, do you know something? We wondered why we couldn't get anybody to stay there. I said, no shit, Sherlock, have you seen this? You know? We had this information. And what we have created is almost ghettoised, really challenging for everybody, service providers, and I bet you all have streets like this, don't you? This is not a Scottish problem. This is generally, it's everybody's problem. He's got a cousin at the same address. He stabs a 14-year-old because this is infection. The whole family is infected. He's arrested with a lockback. Now, we've also got sectarianism between Catholics and Protestants, so it's just to add an extra element, because it's not bad enough. David starts work for the organised criminal group. He attacks a neighbour with a machete. He's dealing heroin and cocaine. His mum's sister, Rose, dies of a heroin overdose, and he inherits her drug debt. He's got a known knife carrier, and he's involved in loads of unreported assault. In 2007, he had a new baby son. And he lives right there. Now, here's a question I'm going to ask you. Tell me, if this was in your area, if this was in Melbourne, or it was in Perth, or it was, and this family was there, tell me, would David's boy's life be any better than his dad's? Tell me if you think, put your hand up if you think it would be. Now, isn't that really interesting? Because in the intervening period, we have spent billions and billions of pounds or dollars saying that children are protected, that their lives are different. So tell me why it's not happening. Can you have a think about it? Because we've done the same. And that is my challenge to public services, because we've rushed in and we've said, we'll sort out your housing problems, your parenting problems, everything else. We have absolutely devalued communities and people. We've said, we'll fix it for you. And we never could. We never could. We have to do things very differently. And it's really interesting that you're saying that it's exactly the same here. Isn't it? Children should be protected. His life should be better. And here's the challenge. These are my gang photos. Now, I don't want you to say, I actually was in Boston and somebody said to me, one of these guys, he was a big African-American guy, he said, man, you guys are ugly. And I looked at it and I actually thought, do you know something? I said, you're right, And this is not an issue of race. When I'm down in London, they talk about young black men. This is not about young black men. This is an issue of poverty, alienation, hopelessness, and a whole range of other things. And the challenge is, I counted up to 3,500 before I stopped. So see if you're going to do something, you better do it big, because the scale of the problem is massive. And here's the other thing, which is relatively emerging science, is we now think that the reason we die young at 55, just for men, because women live a bit longer, just to gloat, the reason that we die young is because we are fundamentally changing ourselves. If you live in a household where you don't know whether you're going to come in and you're going to get hit, the rattle of the kitchen door, is somebody going to come in and assault you? Or is there going to be food in the fridge? Your life is inconsistent. You will start to release stress hormone, cortisol. And what we know now is that the level of stress hormones, cortisol levels, in lots of our really deprived families and young men is huge. It is higher than some of the chief executives. And the problem is that when you release cortisol over a long, long time, this is when I murder biochemistry. If there's any biochemists in here, forgive me. When you release cortisol over a long time, it starts an inflammatory process. It's called C-reactive protein, and it makes your arteries sticky. So we are dying young, not because we eat deep-fried Mars bars and deep-fried pizzas, although that is not helping us, and have an addiction to alcohol and cigarettes. It's because of long-term stress. Absolutely. And it's changing us genetically. Because what we're finding now is that children who are born of parents who are living with high cortisol levels, high stress levels, are showing the same reaction. Really, really scary. So Harry Burns, the Chief Medical Officer, is leading on this research, and it is spectacular. And this is what we did. This is the only graph I'm going to show. And this is like what people die of. Cancers, heart disease, lung disease, external causes. But this is why we die more than most. Drugs-related poisoning, alcohol, suicide, and violence. That's what kills us more than any other. And these are all preventable diseases. These are all things that we've got control of. Isn't it interesting? That's what kills us. So, this is what creates well-being. For you to be healthy and to be happy, well-being is a great thing to strive for. You need your life to be predictable, understandable, and manageable. You all got up in the morning, you probably had milk in the fridge. You probably were able to have a sit down at a table and you had a job to go to. You had to come here to listen to somebody ramble on in Scottish. And if you don't have that, you'll experience chronic stress. So you imagine you're a young guy and you're not sure if you're going to go out and get assaulted. Somebody's going to stab you. Or you're living in a domestically violent household. Can you imagine some of these women? Imagine the level of stress they experience. So that's what you need for good health. And if you don't have it, you'll develop your own. If you live without hope, if you have no aspiration, you usually don't care what you join. So you might join a gang. You know, you've got nothing to live for, nothing to aspire to. You need hope. Hope's a really important thing. And we had a very famous guy. He was a Glasgow shipbuilder. He was a communist. That's why I like speaking to him, to the Conservative government. And he was made rector of Glasgow University. And in his rectorial address, this is what he talked about. It was reproduced word for word in the Wall Street Times. And they said it was the finest piece of rhetoric since the Gettysburg Address. And this is what he talked about. He talked about alienation. He talked about it was a cry of men who feel themselves at the mercy of forces beyond their control. They had no say in society, had nothing to do with it. If you ever get the chance to read it in full, it is absolutely, it's an unbelievable speech. And I bet you it refers to communities that you're dealing with, who feel absolutely like they've got no say in society. And I used this during the riots. They felt they had no connection to the political system, to the social system, anything. They felt alienated and they felt hopelessness. Absolutely catastrophic. So, what do you need? Here's the sad thing. The way that we are set up right now is absolutely not fit for purpose in the 21st century. We have all these different agencies. I sometimes have 14 different agencies going to one person's door. We have 20th century services set up for 21st century. For me, it's Scotland. You might think it's the same in Australia. That's entirely up to you. So you need radical change. Absolutely. So what did I do? Well, you know that phrase, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king? I realised that nobody else knew what to do, so I thought, right, I'm going to write a 10-year plan, which goes beyond the political imperative. How long does your politicians get in for? Is it 4 years or 5 years here? Right, you cannot do anything in 4 years. And when I had Mr. Cameron said to me, this is not for tweeting. I was down at number 10 and they said, what do you want of a politician? I said, I don't want any politicians. I want a statesman. You know, statesmen who shut their eyes and think what the country can be like in 10, 15 years' time, 20 years' time. I always talk about Nye Bevan, who set up the health service in the UK. He was never going to see that come to fruition, but he knew what it looked like. Politicians. So you need to be able to say to them, you need to think beyond the 4-year period, because you're not going to make any big differences in 4 years. This needs to be long term. I've actually extended this. It needs to actually be 15 years. But I thought I was pushing it a bit. And I managed to get violence reduction in every single political party's manifesto. So regardless of who got in, I was quids in. I was really, and it was probably the best thing that we ever did. We said they would commit to violence reduction. And then I started to look at what I call teachable moments. The teachable moments for us, and it's based on public health, is when you are motivated to change your behaviour. For some of you, after tonight, it might be when you wake up tomorrow morning and think, I am never drinking again. And that is your teachable moment. For me, it's usually the 1st of January when I've realised I've eaten too much chocolate and I can't get the zip up in my skirt and I get my backside out running. It's based on motivation to change model, Prosecco and Di Clemente. You need to contemplate when you're going to change your behaviour. And you need to do it big. So this is about changing behaviour. Do you remember the public health thing I was talking about earlier on? Parenting. The most important job in the absolute world. When I first came out and I started to talk about parenting as a way to prevent murder, the Glasgow Herald, which is a big paper in Scotland, said, Karyn McClusky needs to get back to the kitchen and start baking scones. The irony was not lost on my family because I'd been in my house 4 years before I realised the oven didn't work. So, and being in the police, you can imagine how many scone recipes I got. Cinnamon scones, and a whole range of things. I don't care. What I know is that kids copy their parents. In Scotland now, and I don't know what it's like here, the makeup of the family has changed. The nuclear family is no more. That's a really sad thing, but it's true. 60% of the households now in Glasgow, and indeed other parts of Scotland, are single occupancy or single parent families. You need to change the way that we're doing things because men are absent. And as a strident feminist, I never thought of myself saying how delighted I am to see so many men in the audience, but you're hugely important, and not just for the obvious things. You're massively important. I don't know what it's like to be a 16-year-old boy, thank you God. I never will. But we have a crisis of masculinity, an absolute crisis of masculinity. We have a whole group of young men who are growing up without any idea about what it is to be a man. And that, for me, is the most frightening thing of all. And I used to be a single parent until last year. That's the reason I got married late, is because I was head of violence. I mean, it wasn't really an attractive possibility for people. You want to meet the head of violence? No. So, and if you think about why this is important, if you look at all the adverse childhood effects, here's why it's important. If you've got one of them, your life's really quite difficult. Imagine if you've got 3 or 4 or even 5. And the evidence is, if you have 4 of them, the risk, and this is British and American studies, the risks of you perpetrating violence are almost 8 times as high. Teenage mum, 2.5 times as high. Obese is really, really important, and the evidence points out to that. So it's about kids. And we had a very famous Nobel laureate economist who James Heckman from Chicago, who did a paper for us. And what he said was, if you were a banker, nobody really wants to be a banker in Scotland now, I have to say, though, since Royal Bank of Scotland really screwed it up for us. He said, if you had £1, where would you invest? For the best return, 0 to 3. That's where you invest. And this is where we in the UK invest. Now, I failed my O-level maths twice, actually. But that graph is the wrong way around, is it not? Because kids don't vote. Kids don't vote. And that is the wrong way around. We should be investing much earlier and much greater in early years, because we wouldn't be getting to the stage that we're in just now. And if you look at what World Health say, this is the primary prevention thing. What they say is, if you want to reduce violence, this is what you do. Safe and stable relationships. Life and social skills. You know, the communication, the problem solving, teamwork and skills that help you get through life without bumping into alcohol or drugs or violence. Challenging the cultural and social norms that support violence, it is wrong. Reducing access to lethal means, and that's lots about policing, about guns and knives for us, and alcohol. It's quite nice being in Australia because I can talk to you about alcohol, you know, because you're a bit like the Scots. And here's the thing, see if you do the early years, it actually affects loads and loads of things. Child abuse, elder abuse, gives you the skills to get through life. And I was doing a think tank talk. Actually, you can taser me off if I go on for too long, because I could talk about this forever. This is my favourite subject. I did a think tank talk about things, and I said, I want to be a bit more like Finland. And you can imagine Alex Salmond, who's our great chieftain of the pudding race in Scotland, was absolutely delighted, because in Finland they did something really different. See, when they were really falling off the cliff in 1970s when they would get antisocial behaviour, they didn't develop antisocial behaviour orders. They taxed people more. And what they did was they invested loads in early years. 5% of the working population are called pedagogues. They're a mixture of social work and health and nursing. And they go in and they support the child and the family until the age of 8. They don't go to school until they're 8. And when they go to school, there's no educational outcomes. The only outcome for Finnish society is to turn out the best equipped kids to meet the needs of the nation. So that's all the social skills. But you know what the byproduct is? They turn out the best educated kids in the world. They're constantly at the top of the OECD PISA study, so it works. And I was asking the minister, I said, what did you do? He said, first you need political will. This is the direction we're going in, this is the vision for where we're going. Then you need everybody to work together. A lot easier than it sounds. That's when I really need a gang injunction, is getting everybody to work together. You need to change society's view about the nature of crime, and that's why it's so important you have people like Nick Tilley and Richard Catalano talking about the evidence base. Then you need to engage the role of the media. I don't know what your media is like here. We have the Daily Mail, which we often talk about. It's like reading, it's like spending 20 minutes in a lunatic asylum. You know that? But you have to bring them in because they will change opinions. And you need constructive crime prevention alternatives. When I speak to sheriffs and judges, and I do all the judicial training for judges, and they'll say to me, I would like to sentence people to alternative things, but I don't have them. And that's why the prison population keeps going up and up and up. And can I tell you, we know it doesn't work, because if it did work, America would have no crime. They jail 5 million people a year. And I mean, they've tried it, honestly. I mean, they have really tried. It's not working. You need to do other things. And then you need schools, and I mean, we do loads in schools and secondary prevention. And we actually stole something from the States, which was called Mentors in Violence Programme, which was, we wanted to change the social norms. You know, the norms that say that that's all right, but we knew that we had to get the kids to do it. We had to get the kids, because me going in and saying, don't carry knives and don't do this, and you speak about women like this, we had to get the kids to change the social norms. So we did a bystander. So we taught the 6 years, who taught the 5th years, who taught the 4th years. And the kids changed their social norm in the school. It has been absolutely spectacular, and I was a real cynic. The simplest programme, it was actually started by the American military to reduce bullying and to create a social framework where people said, you know something, I don't like you speaking about that, like that about women. And they did it themselves. It's absolutely spectacular. And it was about saying to everybody, you can't stand by and do nothing. You have to say something. You see something, you say something. You hear something, you say something. The challenge is for us now, we've been doing it at our schools, and people are saying, but my parents beat each other up at home. And we're starting to, you know, get lots of self-report in our schools. But the problem is that we're not really up to the challenge, because we think that 2/3 of our young offenders at our institutions have mental health issues. And we don't even test for them. We test only for the programmes that we have. So if I'm putting a young offender or a young person, if I've got an anger management course or I've got a cognitive behavioural course, that's the only things they'll test for, because that's what we've got a course for. We don't test people in the round or evaluate people in the round and then think, right, see if we don't have it, we're going to have to invent it. We're going to have to do something. So we're really not up to the challenge. I mean, our mental health, services are absolutely overwhelmed, and I don't know what it's like here, but particularly for our young people, it's pretty catastrophic. And also when you're assaulted, if anybody doesn't like horrible pictures, please shut your eyes. I'll tell you when to open them again. We have a high rate of assault. We have some of the worst facial injury anywhere in the world. If you want to look at bullet wounds, you want to be a surgeon who specialises in bullet wounds or whatever else, you can go to Los Angeles or you can go to Joburg. If you want to look at facial injury, you come to Scotland. So we have the worst facial injury. This is called the Glasgow Smile. Has anybody heard of the Glasgow Smile? Right, Glasgow Smile is very famous in Scotland. It's a 14-year-old boy who's been hit across the face with a machete. We have a serious facial injury every 6... You don't like this, do you? I'm going to put this off now. Just in case you faint. I was a really crap nurse. We have a serious facial injury every 6 hours, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year in each of our major hospitals. We have quite a lot. Can you imagine having a big facial injury down your face? Now, he's a victim, but what do you think when you see somebody with a big scar on their face? You think he's a hard man, don't you? They will suffer 60 years worth of deprivation when they get that scar on their face. Now, do you know, it's really interesting. We actually accepted that. See if that was happening to women. Do you not think we'd be absolutely up in arms, wouldn't we? We'd be absolutely up in arms. But because it's happening to guys, it was just like, well, it's just what they do. So we started to intervene. I trained every nurse in the clinic to intervene when people came in with any type of facial injury. I mean, that's very severe. And they would do that thing, you know that this isn't working out overly well for you here, because sometimes we'd like to think that all the victims are over here and they're all lovely and fluffy, and all the offenders are over here and they're horrible bad buggers. The problem is sometimes they're the same group, aren't they? They're a victim one week and offender the next. And our services are set up completely differently. So we started to look at how we could intervene at every single teachable moment when somebody was motivated. We also then trained every dentist, because if I punch you, not I'm going to because I'm dead nice and I'm violent introduction, first thing you lose is your teeth. And I started to say to dentists, what do you see when someone comes in and they've got loose teeth? And the guy said, nothing. I said, has anybody seen domestic violence in here? And a dentist put up his hand and he said, oh, I had a woman in my chair, he said, last week. He said she had cigarette burns in the top of her mouth where she'd been forced down and somebody had stubbed cigarettes out. I said, what did you say? He said, I said nothing. I didn't know what to say. So we give them the language. This isn't an injury I would normally see in my chair. You're in a safe place. You know that? AVDR, really simple. I teach it to everybody. Ask, validate, tell them they don't have to put up with it. You document it because they might want to come back later and report it. And then you refer onwards. Teach it to absolutely everybody. I'm just doing it with the fire service just now because the fire service don't need to point and squirt anymore because we don't have many fires really in Scotland because they've been really effective. But they are putting in fire alarms. I say, what do you say when you go into someone's house and you see somebody with a bruise on their face? because they're 85% likely to be a victim of domestic violence, and they want to be asked. So we train them, because you know that no one's safe until everybody's safe. This is everybody's issue. And why would I train vets? How many know why I train vets? I run the homicide database. I've got 3,500 murders on it. And what I looked through was I saw a high incidence of animal abuse, and particularly in domestic violence cases. So I decided I was going to train all the vets. And you can imagine there was great hoots of laughter, like all creatures great and small. Although I have to say, is it just me or have I been in the police too long? You know that? Are you and your pet sharing a secret? Does that sound like bestiality to you? I have to change it, because I look at it and I think, oh, it's no good. See, you too now, see, that's it. And it's my friend's dog that's on it. She says, please don't say that. So I started to train the vets. Now, I had to train them in non-accidental injury of animals because it's the woman that normally brings the dog to the vets. And the first day we did it, we had a vet phoned up. She says, you're never going to believe this. She says, like a pregnant woman came in with a dog, had 3 breaks to its leg, inconsistent injury. She says, and I thought, I'm just going to have a go. So she asked, and she did all the thing, and it didn't work out quite how she wanted, but she phoned me up afterwards. She says, I thought it was an integrity test by the violence reduction unit. I said, oh yes, I sit outside in the car park and break dogs' legs all the time, just to see if you're actually intervening, I don't know what kind of woman she thinks I am. But it's about everybody. So you're training hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. This is about everybody's issue. And then we started to try and tackle the gangs. And I suppose it's probably what we're known most for. We decided that, I said to the chief, right, Chief, I want you to get all the gang members, we're going to get them in the room, we're going to tell them to stop, and we're going to provide them a way out. And he said, Karyn, tell me it's more complex than that, because that sounds like it's going to fail. And I said, oh, it is, but it's a chief constable, you really want to keep it quite low level. And what I did, and I'm going to make this sound really simple, and it's not. Behind that one number is every single service you will ever need. So you phone that one number up, I come out to you within 24 hours. Within 7 days, I'll have a programme. Behind that one number is health, social services, education, addiction, every single person. We all shared the same information. Everybody had access to it. I broke loads of laws doing it. But I asked the young people, I said, can I share your information? And most of them said yes. You know, that's what overcame data protection. And then what I did was we got in, we swept up all the gang members, took them into a court. We had 150 in the morning and 120 in the afternoon. We had helicopters and dogs and everything. I mean, it was really overwhelming. And then we had the chief constable. He stood up. He said, it stops now. The violence has to stop. We have had enough. We had the community in the well of the court. And he said, we know who you are. We know where you live. He said, I'm so powerful. He said, I can have 17,000 cops outside your front door, which was a complete lie because most of us were on holiday or But it was a good bluff. It was a bit short though. And what we did at the same time was we flashed the pictures around. You could see people, pointing to them, pointing to, that's me, that sort of thing. Because we catch the feckless and the stupid. But it was really interesting because the cop's standing up and you could see them, their chest is out and they're like, come ahead. And then we had a doctor stood up and he showed them some of the injury. And what he said was he was an expert in cleft palate surgery, all these babies. He showed them babies. And he said, I've got a waiting list now for doing these babies. He said, because I'm so busy stitching you guys up. And they couldn't even look. But the most powerful thing was we had a mum stood up. And the mum said, I held my 16-year-old as he bled to death in my arms, begging me not let him die. Begging me, and can I tell you, it's really interesting. The Scots, we are not overly familiar with emotion. You could hear them crying in the back of the courtroom, honestly. Unbelievable. Regardless of the fact that they don't love anybody else, they love their mothers, even if they come from really dysfunctional families. And what we said was, we want you to stop. If you don't stop, the policing will be fearsome. We will sweep up your whole group. So what you do will affect your liberty and your liberty and your liberty. We'll sweep up the whole group. But we want you to stop. And I actually didn't think that anything would happen. We had over 600 contact us. We got them into jobs. We got them into a whole range of things. Gang violence is now the exception and not the rule. And tell me, why is it a good thing that people report dogfiling in parts of Glasgow now? Because it's not one of these things that people think is a good thing, because 3 years previous to that, they were reporting people fighting with machetes in their street. And dogfiling is what the middle classes complain about. So they're now complaining about what the middle classes complain about, which for me is a positive thing, because that means the community has changed. The three prongs of it were you need policing, you need local services, and you need the moral voice of the community to say, we've had enough. We're not doing this anymore. We're stopping. We care about you. I don't want to be going to your house to tell you, your mother that you've died or that you've just been arrested for murder, because sometimes the look in the mother's face is almost exactly the same. It's a really difficult thing. Really very difficult to do. But you started to get some of the group mechanics working and to really empower a sense of change and a sense of hope. Very, very difficult. But one of the big things is, and you've not got this in Australia, we're in the depths of a deep recession. Our jobs for young people are absolutely horrendous. You know, a third of the population in Glasgow, what's the population of Melbourne? Anybody know? 4 million. About 4 million. Well, we have about 2.2 million in Strathclyde. A third are wholly unemployed. It's catastrophic. And what we know is the best way to stop a gun or a gang or a knife is to get them into sustainable employment. One of the best people to do that is Father Greg Boyle, who runs Homeboy Industries. Has anybody ever heard of it? In the States, have a look. He is the most extraordinary person. I've known him for about 7 years, the most extraordinary person I've ever met. He has about 15,000 people comes through his door, and he's did this massive social enterprise. It turns over $15 million a year. He provides all the food at LAX airport. It's absolutely spectacular. They provide all the food at City Hall. He said that they employ waiters and waitresses with attitude, which I really quite like, but it's absolutely spectacular. And then just quickly, alcohol. It's difficult. When I go to the States and I talk about alcohol, they don't have the same issues. A third of the population in the States are temperate. They don't drink. So when I'm talking to people about sober friends and sober places, they can imagine that. In Scotland, most people say to me, I don't know anybody who doesn't drink. And yet alcohol goes through us. We drink to get drunk. 80% of our homicides involve alcohol, victims and offenders. You can read these. I'm not going to go through them. It is an issue for us. You know that in Vino Veritas, from Wine Springs Truth? We have a catastrophic relationship. We have almost 17,000 deaths annually. In Scotland, we have 100 alcohol-related incidents a day. We now regularly have 21 and 22-year-olds who die of liver cirrhosis in our units because they've been drinking since the age of 8 or 9. So we've had to do something quite differently. You know that My Name is Scotland and we have a problem. So we started to talk about, we still have a whole range of people who talk about, but alcohol and violence, there's not a unique correlation. Can I tell you, it's like pouring petrol on the fire. If you have the predilection for violence, you know, all the skills, and then you put them in the environment. And when you look at the breath alcohol levels, this is alcohol levels, 4 a.m. or later, and this is them going up, people preloading, and then higher levels of violence. It might not be a unique correlation, but quite frankly, the evidence is enough for me. I sit on the minimum unit price. I sit on the governance board. We're just about to bring in minimum unit pricing. My family refer to me as the alcohol Taliban, which is actually really insulting. Well, that's just my dad, you know. But you have to do something really big and really brave. And we've had to really tackle it. We've been serving drunks has been illegal for over 400 years, but we've only prosecuted 3 people. Do you know that, really? You know, I mean, I watch them on the CCTV cameras. I know they're drunk before they even go into the club. And then you see them coming back out, and they're absolutely stocious, which is a very Scottish word. So for me, and we're talking about alcohol now, we need to jail those we're afraid of and those we're mad at. When I go into the jails, most people are in there because of alcohol-related harm. Sometimes their whole offending history is just through alcohol. And I would rather have mandatory programs than mandatory sentencing. I'd rather say to people, you have to do a mandatory parenting program or do a whole range of other things around alcohol. So do you think there's a human right to drink? Does anybody think that? That it's enshrined in your human rights? We have the European ECHR, a European Commission on Human Rights. Alcohol's not there. If you're a violent, angry person, I'm sorry, I think I should be able to tell you, you're not allowed to drink. I will help you. It's a criminal justice intervention, but with a health outcome. So I went over to Denver about 4 years ago, and I brought back 300 alcohol bracelets. Anybody ever seen them? No? Goes around your ankle, tests the ethanol in your sweat every 30 minutes and electronically transmits it. It is quite the scariest technology I have ever seen. I wore it for 3 days and it categorically proved I was a cheap date. And we've been using it just now. And it's really interesting because they use it for drink driving in the States, and I've been using it for violence. And what I've been saying to people is, you're not allowed to drink. And I'm going to help you not drink. I'm going to give you brief motivational interviewing. We're going to give all the support that we can because I need you to have a sober life where alcohol doesn't play a part. And see, when we get it to succeed, it has a halo effect in the house. It improves not only their health, but also improves that of their family and their kids. The really interesting thing is, we've now decided that Scots drink more than anybody else because the state said to us, oh, people always tell us they drink more, and then I had regular readings of 1.2 on people, and what that meant was, when I looked up the thing, it said imminent death. And so I used to phone them up and say, are you all right? And they say, absolutely, I've cut down my drinking. And I was like, imminent death. But it's absolutely fascinating. And I sat in a court in New York, in Queens, and I saw a judge sentencing people to employment. And I thought, now there's a thing. And what they were doing was they were actually saying to people, for 3 months, for 190 days, or 4 months actually, you're not allowed to drink. And I'm going to support you not to drink. Then you will get educational input, and then we're going to help you find employment. And I thought it was the most spectacular thing I'd ever seen. You know, that really, had a positive outcome. And she brought the family, and she said to the offender, bring your family into court. And she would say to people, you're dressed for success. You're going to make this. And she had all the family supporting them. And they had the most spectacular outcomes. It's absolutely well worth thinking about. I've been trying to introduce it to our judges just now. You can all see them. Our judges are all about 60 odds, you know that? And they just want bigger jails. 5 minutes, right, I'm nearly done. So, discipline 1, innovate. How do you know when an idea is innovative? It's when it scares the hell out of people. And for any of you here, I want you to do it regularly on a monthly basis. If you are not scaring your boss or yourself, you're not doing the right thing. You need to do it differently. When I look at some of the big innovations, they're actually really simple. See, when you look at this list of things here, I don't have time to go through it. This is in one area really hard. And I asked them how they did it, and people say millions of pounds, massive investment. It wasn't. This was a local community that did this. They decided they'd had enough. And they got together and they motivated themselves. Didn't want the police, didn't want anybody else. They got the older groups, because they had a big elderly population, to talk to the young kids. So the young kids' language abilities went up. They supported each other. They decided that they would they would get the money from the council, and they would prioritise all the houses so they could get rid of dampness in the house. And when they got rid of the dampness, the kids' asthma rates went down, which meant they went back to school, which meant boys' attainment went up. Really, really dead simple. Asset-based approaches. I'm trying to look at asset-based policing. How can we go into a community and look for the assets and note the deficits? If I ask any cop here, they can tell me the worst places, can't they? I bet you guys all know the worst places, all the roads you shouldn't go to, etc. You tell me where all the assets are on those roads, the people who do really well, who love their kids, who are actually willing to do something for their community. And that's absolutely where it's at. If we want long-term, sustainable change, that's how you do it. So, you need to zig where others are zagging. You need to have your chief constable or your boss gripping the table and wondering where to send you next. And you need to be prepared to fail, and sometimes spectacularly. I've put lasers on top of CCTV cameras. That's one you should ask me about later. Didn't quite make the press, but should have done. You need to do things that are different. And you need to collaborate. But here's the thing. I want to ask you a quick question. You'll probably all sit in partnership meetings. Have you ever sat in a partnership meeting and got to the end of it and thought, I have no bloody idea what happened there? Put up your hand. You thought, what a waste of time? So you've organised the next date for your meeting, but nothing's actually happened? You need to have a verb in your sentence, a doing word. If there is no doing word in your sentences, then you're doing the wrong thing. We sit around tables and we talk about partnership and it has no outcome. And the reason is because we've never sat down and closed our eyes and thought, right, what does success look like? And then asked the communities that we're trying to serve, what does success look like? You need to ask people, right, tell me when we know that this has worked, and are we all going in the same direction? Because partnership's a strange thing, isn't it? We love partnership, don't we? I'm a climber. If you're at the bottom of a rope and I'm doing something really tricky and I'm likely to let go because I'm dead lazy, I need you still to be holding the rope. That's good partnership. And partnership's about people, it's not about agencies. You find good people you want to work with. And you need to lead. As I've said, anybody can lead. But you need to have the stomach for uncertainty, because this isn't easy. And you're going to have things that really happen that are dreadful. You need to hold steady. I've done this for 11 years solid now. I've never changed. I wrote the strategy, I wrote the policy, and then I committed to staying to deliver it so I could be held to account if I got it wrong. I mean, I have failed spectacularly. I've got a whole lecture doing failure. And you need to set the mood music. I say to everybody, we can do this. We absolutely can do it. Don't think about the performance measurements. Just do the right thing, and I'll support you if it works out well, and even if it doesn't. And if you ask the public, what kind of policing do they want? Tough or soft, what do they say? Tough. What about, tough or smart, what do they want? Smart. The public want smart policing. Because it's always about tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, isn't it? They actually want smart policing. And smart can also be tough. Just needs to be in the right place at the right time. And this is almost my last one. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Our performance framework hits the target but misses the point. We have targets around stop search. Some of the policing targets actually mitigate against us doing the right thing. You know, we need to have a think about a different way of measuring. And one of the areas in the UK just now, they've actually got rid of all the performance measurement and just said to people, go and do your job. You're really experienced. Go and do the right thing. And I bet you any money the changes will be spectacular. And this is one of my favourites. It's Adam Smith who wrote, he was one of the masters of the Enlightenment in the 1770s, and he said, we are the only species who is born with a conscience. We actually care about people. We care about doing the right thing. It's not because we get money or anything else. It's just because we take some pleasure in helping other people. And we need to do a bit more of that because we've forgotten. You know those people that close their curtains in really nice parts of Sydney or Melbourne or Glasgow and say that's just them bad boys in, or that's just those people. There's loads and loads of people that want to do the right thing. And this is Father Greg Boyle from Homeboy who said, we all just belong to each other. And we need to do more of it. So, you need to aspire to build the cathedral and not the garden shed. Got loads of garden sheds. Too small, needs to be much bigger. And if you're going to fail, fail spectacularly. Honestly. You need to be fabulous. And in public service, and if you're in third sector or wherever you are, you need to remind yourself, why is it you do this? And why does it matter? Because you might be the only people who are standing between someone in jail or suicide or domestic violence. You need to be good. So thanks very much indeed. And I hope I've not been too Scottish.